Welcome to Desperately Seeking the 80s. I am Meg.
And I'm Jessica. And Meg and I have been friends since 1982. We got through middle school and high school together here in New York City, where we still live.
And where we podcast about New York City in the 80s. I do Ripped from the Headlines.
And I do pop culture.
So, Jessica, what is your theory about the drones?
My theory about the drones is that they are not aliens.
I thought you would think they were aliens.
I wanted
I'm
them.
a little disappointed that you don't. I think they're aliens.
I apologize for being sane for once in my life. They're too droney to be aliens. But my favorite thing that I saw, because of course I did a dive and I looked at Reddit, as one does, and there was someone who said, there have been huge UFOs over my property in Nebraska, and these don't look anything like it. And I was like, the people have spoken. Okay,
there you have it.
That's it.
The experts.
So I would say that it's either someone, being a prankster, or it's surveillance.
Or it's just as regular as always, but now it's sort of like the satanic panic or whatever. People are like now hyper aware. So anything that looks like an upside down cross is actually Satan. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And I also think that people are possibly hyper and aware and vigilant because there's been a lot of violence lately. And I think that whether or not it makes any sense to connect drones to school shootings or the CEO, it doesn't make any sense. It's just people being hyper vigilant and worried.
They did tell us if you see something, say something. And so everyone's saying a lot about the things in the sky.
And then the response is, don't worry about it. Like, what? That isn't helping.
I don't know if we've talked about this before on the podcast. Jury duty?
Oh.
I mean, I know you didn't have jury duty in the 80s, so that's a...
Well, technically, I would have in 1988.
But did you?
I have no memory at all. I don't know what I did yesterday. How could you possibly ask me that?
But you have done jury duty?
Many, many times. And despite being a lawyer, in fact, maybe because of it, I'm always picked to be in the jury pool for voir dire, and I've been on 2 juries.
Ooh. Criminal?
One of them, but very low stakes, not like...
Guilty or not guilty?
Oh my God, so obviously guilty that it was absolutely... I mean, actually, no, both of them were technically criminal, although one was just a misdemeanor. It was a turnstile jumping, which was
criminal.
Yeah. I know it's hard. I know intellectually that it is, but I can't bring myself to say it's a crime against nature and people. The other one was drugs. And this was long before, the legalization of marijuana and all of that stuff. And the guy was carrying, although this has nothing to do with marijuana, the guy was carrying, I think, some coke on him, but it was just enough for personal use. There was no way that it was distribution, but it was still against the law.
So you're like, why are we here?
It was sort of hilarious because we all understood that there were different charges against him and that we could opt for the lowest one.
Okay.
And choices. It was very obvious that he did it because there were multiple charges against him. So we could say guilty on this. Yes, he did this. And there was literally, like the movie, one person who was a holdout because she said, I'm not sending a boy to jail. I'm just not doing it. And we were like, but that's not the job. Like, you have to actually engage with this. And eventually she came around. So she was the Lee J. Cobb of our ridiculous jury pool.
And you're referencing 12 Angry Men.
Yes, I'm sorry.
But in 12 Angry Men, he was right.
Yes. I just mean that she was the holdout.
Okay.
And in her mind, she was right. So, there's something.
Who knows?
Have you been on a jury?
I have, but I'm going to start my story now.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, because what you said was just such a perfect lead-in.
Oh, okay.
My sources are The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Daily News. Just before midnight, on December 31st, 1986, Jean and Renee Cass scurried out of Scaretti Restaurant at 34 East 52nd Street near Madison and headed hastily towards Times Square. They would be a little late for the ball drop, but wanted to be in the thick of the celebration. The retired couple had traveled from Toulouse in the south of France with a group of 9 tourists to New York City on December 28th to celebrate the New Year. That New Year's Eve night, the group disagreed about the fastest way to get to Times Square from East 52nd and kind of dispersed as they all rushed from the restaurant. Jean and Renee made it as far as 52nd between 6th and 7th Avenues, passing right in front of Ben Benson's Steakhouse, which, do you remember that?
I do.
Oh my goodness. Well, now it's Ocean Prime Restaurant, FYI.
Interesting.
When a Black man in his late teens or early 20s with close cropped hair and wearing a beige jacket and dark trousers attacked Jean, Renee tried to pull the mugger off of her husband, but Jean fell to the pavement, hitting his head. The mugger rifled through his pockets and grabbed his wallet and about $500 in cash. Jean Cass slipped into a coma and died at 10:30 a.m. at St. Luke's Roosevelt of massive intracranial injuries. The police issued a statement, quote, "We desperately need witnesses of the incident to come forward to identify the attacking youth. The Midtown North Precinct has established a 24-hour hotline, 477-7447. Close quote. No 212, you note.
I do.
According to Lieutenant Cohen, quote, "I can't believe there were no witnesses. There were hundreds of people in the immediate area." Within a week, Eric Smokes, who was 19, and David Warren, who was 16, were arrested for the assault and murder. The police had received, quote, "confidential information from various people present at the scene who are now witnesses in the case." Flash forward 6 months to July 6th, 1987. 26-year-old Secretary Luana Mongo Dunn was called for jury duty. And she wasn't upset about it. Quote, "I believe it is our civic duty to serve." Close quote. During the voir dire, she told the court that she had heard of the mugging of the French tourist, but that did not disqualify her. Do you remember? I vaguely remember the mugging of the French tourist, or am I confusing it with another French tourist? I don't know. For me, that sounded familiar.
I don't know. I have a sort of a cloud of knowing of various terrible things that happened during Times Square New Year's Eve gatherings.
Oh, for me, it was about French tourists.
No, yet again, your memory trumps mine. Sorry, I didn't mean to use that word.
It's okay. Ugh. But yeah, that did not disqualify her that she had heard of this incident, and she was seated on the jury for the trial. The trial was called The People of the State of New York versus Eric Smokes and David Warren. They were being tried together. She learned that Eric and David were best friends from East New York, Brooklyn, which we have discussed on this podcast, who admitted that they'd been near Times Square that night, but were blocks from the assault. They had wanted to see the Times Square ball drop and had made it as far as the Latin Quarter nightclub, just blocks south of Ben Benson's, but had headed back to Brooklyn because they didn't have money for the club's cover. They had been held in Rikers Island since their arrest. 21 people testified in the trial. Renee, the wife, who did not speak English, 2 doctors, 3 employees of Ben Benson's Steakhouse, police officers, and witnesses. 4 of these people who testified fingered Eric and David as the assailants. I knew you would giggle at that, but I was like,
child.
It's the word you use.
I'm sorry.
All 4 of these witnesses were between the ages of 16 and 20. They gave details. One said David stole the wallet. Another said that Eric punched the 71-year-old man and grabbed the wallet. A fifth said Eric had confessed to him. Luana, our jury member, noticed that the witnesses were, quote, not looking the defendants in the eye and seemed as if they absolutely didn't want to be there. But she didn't really make much of it. But she remembered that.
That's interesting because it's a rarely heard comment about witnesses, having any kind of connection with the defendant.
Huh. I know, like, why would you really? But for some reason, there was a vibe that just seemed odd to her. But again, she didn't clock it as weird. She just noticed. Mm-hmm. The testimony ended on July 14th, and the jury retired to deliberate. They started with an informal poll. Luana went first around the table. Remember, she's 26.
She is probably on her first jury as well.
Clearly. And said, guilty in this just round table poll. Guilty. But she was followed by 7 not guilties, which made her nervous. She didn't want to be the only one. Ooh, embarrassing. Mm-hmm. But the remaining 4 jurors said guilty. So she wasn't alone.
5 to 7.
She wasn't alone. Once they started discussing the case, the not guilty votes argued that there were no witnesses. But Luana countered that there were, in fact, 5 witnesses. They asked to have the witnesses' testimony read back to them. After that, most of the not guilties switched to guilty.
How could you be in the courtroom and not know that there were witnesses?
I don't know.
I know you don't. This is a rhetorical question, but it's insane sounding.
There was one holdout, a 30-year-old Latina who kept saying she didn't believe the police, quote, all cops lie. And the charges were too severe, and she couldn't convict 16-year-old David Warren because of his, quote, baby face. Luana was frustrated. She felt the woman should have been upfront about her bias during voir dire. The jurors were sequestered and went to a hotel that night.
Oh, nightmare.
And again for a second night. The jury room got heated. One guy shoved a chair and it crashed into the wall. Finally, after 48 hours of haranguing, the woman, the Latina, cried and threw up her hands and voted guilty. They just wore her down. The 4 women sent a note to the judge, quote, we would like the court to know that we did not come to a decision lightly, but with great emotional turmoil. We have reached a verdict. Eric Smokes was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. David Warren got 15 to life. Then, in 2005, James Walker, one of the eyewitnesses, wrote a letter to Eric that he had lied on the stand and he was sorry. He was a crack addict who had been arrested on January 2nd for another robbery, and he implicated Eric to stay out of jail. Eric was eventually paroled in 2011, so nothing came of that letter. Eric was just like, oh my God, what the, But he finished out his sentence. He was paroled the standard way, 2011. And David, again, was paroled in sort of the standard system way in 2007. But they wanted exoneration. Their lawyers were able to get sworn affidavits from 3 of the trial witnesses that investigators threatened them with prosecution unless they fingered Eric and David. Craig Femister, one of their lawyers, said, quote, everything points to somebody or a group of somebodies steering the witnesses. One witness told me when he was talking to detectives, he was guessing what they wanted to hear. So he just went along with what they wanted him to say. And it was a high-profile mugging.
They needed to answer to this.
It wasn't just any old person who got mugged, a New Yorker. It was a French tourist. And they're like, we don't like to kill tourists. I swear to God, come back to our city. And if we do...
But if you walk too slowly, then we'll kill you.
If we do happen to, because some awful mugger kills you, we will absolutely make sure that person is punished. So, it was too high profile. There was pressure on it. That did not help. Also, the police did not investigate a call from that tipster hotline, remember?
You're joking.
That identified another man as the killer, giving a physical description and an address where the person was currently smoking crack and currently in possession of the victim's wallet. So basically, hey, the guy who killed that French guy, I'm looking at him right now. He's on the other side of the room. He's smoking crack and he has the guy's wallet, like right now. So like, hurry up, because I don't know how long he's going to be here. And they didn't follow up.
Oh my God.
I know. Don't ask me why.
I don't. I can't.
It would just
How would
be
you
conjecture.
know? No normal human could come up with an easy answer.
In 2020, there was a hearing at which one of the witnesses claimed the police, quote, said basically in so many words, if they didn't do it, you did it. Ooh. But at this hearing, the judge ruled against an exoneration because both Eric and David had apologized for their crimes during their parole hearings, which is the only way you can get paroled. You can't get paroled unless you take accountability for what you did.
That, my friends, is a catch-22.
You cannot get paroled if you say, but I'm actually innocent. Then, in 2022, so this is a couple years later, Alvin Bragg took over the office of Manhattan District Attorney and revamped the unit that investigates allegations of wrongful convictions. An additional witness admitted he'd been pressured by police and lied. That led to a full exoneration of 56-year-old Eric Smokes and 53-year-old David Warren. These are contemporaries of ours. Luana Dunn was there in the courtroom for their exoneration.
Wow. Chills.
She approached the men after the hearing and said, quote, I do want to say I'm so sorry. We gave the verdict based on what we were presented as evidence, which was compelling. Otherwise, none of us would be here right now. I'm so sorry. Eric Smokes said, we don't fault the jurors. Nah, said David Warren. I'm so sorry, Luana said again.
What was nah?
Like, yeah, we don't.
Oh, he was agreeing with
absolutely.
With
like, nah, we don't fault the jurors.
Oh, I thought he was like, nah, fuck you, don't come to me with your apology.
No. Both of these grown men, which is hard to think of them as grown men because they were little boys, but now they're grown men. They're both like, not your fault. They don't even blame the guys who were witnesses against them because they were like, they were
kids
too.
who were pressured by the police. So what did anything ever happen to those cops?
Oh, no, absolutely nothing ever happened to any of those cops. Both Smokes and Warren now work in construction, and they both married the women they were dating when they were arrested.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Smokes promised his mother, who has since passed away, that he would not be bitter. Quote, empathy and forgiveness is a big thing. According to Luana, quote, I'm going to think about them for the rest of my life.
This is such a bag of mixed emotions because they got what they genuinely deserved in the long run, meaning the exoneration. But what an utter nightmare. And, you've done a lot of stories where it comes out that the cops have a lot of methods that they use to wrap up cases that maybe are not
effective,
quite on the up end.
Yeah.
Up.
And actually not effective as far as finding out what the truth is.
Oh, absolutely. And so it's so hard. I mean, the thing that really strikes me hearing, there are many, many things, but the thing that really strikes me hearing this story is like, I'm just adding it on the pile of coercion, strong arming.
It reminded me of the Central Park Five.
Yes, the Central Park Five. How about Little Marty?
Oh God, Little Marty.
Little Marty. Like there's so many stories.
Marty Tankliff, by the way.
Marty Tankliff. I'm sorry. I can only think of him as Little Marty. And like there's so many of these cases that were so I mean, that's the link, right? They're super high profile and there's a huge amount of pressure to close the case, and close the case they shall. Truth be damned.
And in answer to your earlier question, have I ever been on a jury? I have been on a couple juries, and one of them was criminal. And I was one of the people who said guilty when it was just me and one other guy said guilty. Everybody else was saying not guilty. And to me, it seemed obvious. And to everyone else, they were like, but you can't trust police. And I was like, why would he lie?
In both of our experiences, people don't want to convict unless it's something so egregious, right? Like
what I took away from my time on a criminal jury was I hadn't had the same experience with police as some people had in that room, that we were coming from different places. And to me, I was like, why wouldn't you trust them? They have nothing to gain. I don't get it. And they were coming from obviously a place where you are naive, young 20-something-year-old Meg. Well, me and the guy who thought he was guilty prevailed in the end. We actually argued the case and talked through the whole thing, and people came around and we were unanimous and the guy was guilty. And as we walked back in to say that, and it was a drug case, I don't know, there's something, it felt like the stakes were high. Not that we knew they were, but we kind of felt like things felt heavy in the room.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was thinking myself 3 strikes or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Sure.
And so we walked back into the room and suddenly I was like, to your point, I guess, like, oh, fuck. Wait, this isn't theoretical. I'm not right or wrong right now. We're actually doing something that will have a huge impact on this person.
Right.
Oh, also, just to set the scene a little bit, the prosecutor, the DA guy, was such a fucking schmuck. We could not stand it. We hated that, like, I mean, just he was a gross human being and nobody liked him. And so that was like, oh my God, we just have to put that aside, guys. We all agree on that. Guilty.
Like none of us would have a drink with that guy.
Right. We all agree on that. That said, that's not what we're here to determine. Anyway, after the whole thing happened, I think it was me. I had a deer in the headlights thing. Maybe it wasn't just me, let's put it that way. But the judge came into the jury room after we gave the verdict, and he said, I just wanted to make sure that you all knew in here that there was a lot of evidence that you were not allowed to hear, and he's absolutely guilty. And you absolutely did the right thing. And not only that, this was not a violent crime, but he is a violent criminal.
Do you have any awareness of how unusual it is for a judge to do that?
No, I don't.
It is so crazy. Like that is not the judge's job. And in fact, judge being like, thank you for the verdict. And all the judge can do is, if the verdict is outrageous, can make a bench decision instead.
I think he was relieved, and I think he came back because he could tell that at least one of the jurors, me, was kind of freaked out.
All I can say is you must be absolutely 100% right that you looked stricken.
And who knows what that guy actually did? Like, you know what I mean? Like we were talking about like a drug arrest. Like who gives a fuck? Like you said, to your point, who really cares? You know?
Well, and as we have learned from this podcast, and you are the one who really brings this to the table, that if you can't get the guy for what he really did, we'll get him for this.
Oh, yeah.
And
maybe.
And that's what I'm hearing here, that it's like, Al Capone. By the way, I just want you to know, I was about to say Al Capote, and I was like, that's not right. But wouldn't that be great to have like a mashup of Truman Capote and Al Capone? Wouldn't that be? But Al Capone on taxes. So, I'm going to take us back to Clubland.
Okay.
First, we go backwards, as is my favorite thing to do. Olivier Coquelin in 1960 had a big idea. He decided that New York's nightlife was dead. All the good lounges had closed. There was nothing coming in to fill up the space.
1960, so that's like Stork Club?
Right at the end of all of those, El Morocco, all of that stuff.
Okay.
Exactly. So he was like, this place is dead. But this was a Frenchman who had been very accustomed to, well, not accustomed to, but was very excited about what was going on in Paris. In Paris, they were bringing in a new thing that was a dance club that was going to soon be called a discotheque.
Okay.
So Olivier is in New York, and he's like, I'm going to start my own. And he rather both hilariously and unimaginatively calls it Le Club.
Okay.
So
where was it?
To your point, what I really love that you said that is he said that everyone needed an alternative to the stale environments of El Morocco and the Stork Club. He was like, it's over. So he conceived of Le Club, which was the very first American disco.
Wow.
Number one.
Impressive.
And he opened it New Year's Eve, 1960.
Love it.
It was upscale, and it was on Sutton Place.
Weird.
And if you wanted to dance...
Sutton Place?
Yes. And because it was going to be ritzy.
Right, but it's such a quiet...
Not for long. Not with Olivier involved, because Sutton Place was where all of the people who he wanted to go to Le Club lived. So it had, again, unlike a lot of the other clubs, it had a membership fee. Okay. You couldn't just go. There was a $200 initiation fee at the time, a lot of money, and you had to pay $65 in dues a year.
Wow.
Not cheap. Ergo,
No.
Sutton Place. And here's a little description. This is the first disco, not what you'd think. The club's interior design, described by Time magazine, suggested, quote, the living room of an impoverished baron in the family castle, glowering big game, crossed swords, a fireplace, and a half-acre tapestry. As one commentator put it, Le Club was, quote, a French playboy's dream of the ultimate seduction pad. While the disco may have seemed like a refreshing novelty compared to the other clubs that it was trying to replace or horn in on, it had a teeny tiny crowded dance floor and music programmed by an all-powerful platter spinner.
Ha!
It remained an elite sanctuary, and it welcomed people like Henry Ford II and the Duke of Bedford. It was the model for all discotheques to come. L'Interdit in 1963, Il Mio, which was an Italian discoteca, and Shepherd's, a discotheque in the Drake Hotel that was amusingly decorated with Cleopatra-themed decor, sphinxes, tents, pharaohs. But they were nowhere near as exclusive as Le Club.
Are we to assume that these kinds of establishments were already thriving in Europe?
Yes.
Okay.
Thriving, maybe a bit much, but definitely happening.
I actually, now that you say it, I feel like I can picture what you're talking about, and maybe from like movies in the 60s.
Yes, very much so. And in New York City, Regine's
Well,
was
which
the one
I have
that
been to, by the
because
way.
you're so fancy. You get
Well,
so
a
fancy.
little weird, but yes, I did go. I was 21.
Really?
Yeah.
God, you're hip.
No, I didn't go with friends. I went with Ninotchka Manus.
Oh.
My father's
buddy.
Yeah, sure.
The way that they knew that Le Club was here to stay and that, more importantly, discotheques were here to stay was when Lyndon Johnson, as part of his 1964 presidential bid, converted the Club El Morocco into, quote, a discotheque for LBJ.
He liked to dance?
I think that he thought that people who liked him might like to dance.
Huh. Okay.
Olivier Coquelin was no dope. He was a trend spotter. He could see the way that the winds were blowing. He was eventually interviewed by Andy Warhol for Interview magazine. And he said that in the 70s, the discotheque was slipping away. It was before it was slipping away. He said it's slipping away.
Huh.
I think the world as we know it has a few years to go. By as we know it, I mean as we enjoy it, with servants, with camembert, and with fine wines.
He's not wrong.
This will soon be finished. What we know now, taking the Queen Mary to Europe for 6 days and all those P.G. Wodehouse kinds of things, it's gone. It's gone forever. We have 10 years, maybe 15, maybe 20 at most, to enjoy whatever is left.
Did he say why he thought it was going?
Did he need to? He was Olivier Coquelin.
I just thought it'd be interesting if he had a theory.
Indeed. Agreed.
I mean, all of this sounds wonderfully fun if you can afford it. Or, I mean, was the idea that it had become sort of dusty, that people were more excited about other things than all those wonderful things?
I think that the idea was that
Camembert, come on.
I mean, the camembert is hilarious. I think it's like cheese is going out of fashion. Yes, Olivier, that's right. Camembert's over, as is wine. What? But I think that his point is well taken, that, you know, the exclusivity that you have talked about with Capote's Swans, and we know that it still exists, but having it be the ultimate of chic and nightlife and all of that was on the decline. And there is a democratization of nightclubs, which takes us next to the next nightclub we're going to talk about. Now, mind you, how did I get in on all of this? Well, I was looking at the New York Times, and in 1980, there was a 20-year anniversary party for Le Club.
I love it.
And they covered it. And it
was still there.
It was still there. It only had like 5 more years to go. It was on its way out.
Can you tell me exactly where it was?
It moved. It was...
I just want to picture, because I know Sutton Place pretty well. I'm just trying to picture the storefront.
I think it was like 313 East 54th Street.
Okay.
Like that was...
Got it.
So not far from the townhouse.
Exactly. And
right.
It's that strip, and we're learning so much more about that mysterious strip. The wrinkle rooms.
The wrinkle rooms. I'm dead. You're right. You're 100% right.
Who knew? It was a little on the down low, as one says.
It's the place to be on the DL. I'm sure Olivier was on the DL a little bit. So, yeah. And I think that it's so wonderful to the idea that there's all of this happening right in the face of respectability.
Mm-hmm.
It's also where, I think we talked about this before, but it's where the consulates are.
Okay, yeah.
So
sure.
You've got a lot of diplomats who want to partay. So I was looking at this article from 1980, and it was going on and like the food and the place, and isn't it amazing? 1960, it's still hopping. So I was like, who the hell is Olivier Coquelin and Le Club? It sounds vaguely familiar, but dopey. Don't ask me how, but then that took me to another thing in the New York Times. But in order to get there, I'm going to have a quick little moment to describe a very important nightclub that is part of the next piece of the story. And it was called The Saint. The Saint was one of the first gay nightclubs to come out of the post-Stonewall gay life in New York City. And there was the Garage and Paradise Garage and places like that. But this was going to be a palace of dancing. It was going to be the most out loud and proud place on the planet. And it was. It was a cathedral to dance, to sweating, to sex, to drugs, you name it. And so I found a wonderful little article about the saint. It was called The Vatican of Disco. And it was also members only.
So what year are we now?
It was founded in 1980. So we're going from the 20-year anniversary of Le Club to the opening of exactly what Olivier Coquelin was saying is the next wave. Like it's going to be different. There's no more of this gentility.
Okay.
But it's members only. But it's members only because the gay population is still just trying to keep a little safe.
Got it.
So it's only gay. And it was the most expensive gay club created at that point. It was on 2nd Avenue and 6th Street, and it started off as a Yiddish theater.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it was eventually the Fillmore East.
Of course.
And
well, you know what it became after the Fillmore East? A bank. Immigrant bank. It's a bank right now.
Well, in the 19... Now it is.
Yeah.
But first it was the Saint.
Yes. First the Saint, right. Then Fillmore East. Are you sure Fillmore East?
No, it's Fillmore East, then the Saint,
That
and
makes
then the
more
bank.
sense. Yes.
So in the 1970s, entrepreneur Bruce Mailman, who, guess what else he owned?
Tell me.
The Baths.
Okay.
He decided with a great interior designer, that he was going to create the Saint. And it became the ultimate underground dance world. And when I say the Baths, I mean the St. Mark's Baths. It was futuristic, elevated, 4,800 square foot circular dance floor topped by an aluminum domed ceiling that served as a theatrical scrim, hiding nearly 500 speakers. Can you imagine the din? There was a projector known as the Tree of Light that rose from the center of the floor with 1,500 fixtures to create various light shows.
Cool.
And the people who went to it were the kinky, the strange, the arts people. What happened in the early 80s was the AIDS crisis. And the people who went to the Saint were no more. They lost 700 members in an incredibly short period of time, over the space of 2 years.
Oh my God.
But this is a business that they had to keep going. So they decided they were going to open it up to straight people. And that's how you and I eventually made our way to the Saint. But in 1987, the Saint took another turn. As we have discussed on this podcast, in 1986, the summer of 86, something happened that changed nightlife for teens forever in New York City, which was
the murder of Jennifer Leavitt.
Precisely. So kids were getting carded. They were also getting nervous. So what happened was some enterprising teens from NYU and Horace Mann created an all-teen dry nightclub at the Saint. The Saint was at 105 2nd Avenue and 6th Street, and it became the haven for the Just Say No generation. Just Say No, we've talked about on this podcast before, but that was Nancy Reagan's Say No to Drugs campaign that compelled her to sit on Mr. T's lap for one of the most hilarious, bizarre, famous photo ops of the 1980s.
Did you ever go to one of those dry parties?
Absolutely not.
Me neither. Oh, no, I lie. I went once and I remember it vividly, and it was weird. There was a weird vibe.
Yeah, because no one knew what to do with themselves.
The lights were too bright. There was something about it that just didn't quite work.
Well, partly because they modeled themselves on the teen nightclubs that were proliferating on Long Island. It's the one and only time I've ever heard of New York teens being like, hey, what are they doing on the other side of the bridge and the tunnel? Maybe we'll do that. So they did it out of necessity because kids really didn't have a place to go. The idea for it came out of something that I had never heard of, and I wanted to know if you had. After Jennifer Levin's murder, these kids in the New York City school system, none of whom we ever knew, nor would we have ever spoken to, created the United Concerned Students. Now, I was like,
so this is after our time anyway.
This is our senior year.
So we had our own thing going.
Yeah, but guess what? So this is an article in the Times in 1987. And it's this one kid, Paul Zumoff, 19 years old at NYU, and Lance Corman and another one, Mr. Hirshhorn. I don't know why he's Mr. in this. They're both 17 and they're both students at Horace Mann. They all got together and decided to get in touch with the Saints marketing director, Steve Gold. So these three kids.
Enterprising, I guess.
Yes, but guess what? You can't look up this group. It didn't exist.
What?
This is these three kids bullshitting their way into putting a party together.
Okay.
For which they charged.
So it was just business.
It was business as usual, but kids were really, a certain kind of kids who were not us, were deeply into it because after Dorian's, or even from their own experiences trying to go to those places, they said something that we have sort of touched on here, but we haven't really gotten into in any great detail. They didn't want to be where grown-ups were. They felt unsafe. It wasn't the other kids. It was
So are you
adults.
saying that these Horseman guys or Tish guys or NYU or whatever, that they were principled or that they wanted to make money?
When you say principled, is that what you're saying?
Principled. Like,
no, they were putting themselves out.
Cared about
no, they didn't give half a shit. They, in my opinion, I'm sure that they would debate me. They said this is an opportunity so that kids can party and feel safe. But they had a door charge and they were charging for whatever they were selling inside. It was like a juice bar.
I swear I went to one of these things. It was so weird.
Really?
Well, I don't know if it was this one at the Saint. I don't know, but I have a vivid memory of getting a pass to one of these kinds of things and going with a group of people and just feeling like, do we have to stay? What is this?
No, you did not.
Oh, but I remember running into Kate Arthur. It's all coming back to me.
Oh my God. Tell me
and she went to Horace Mann.
Yes, she did.
And I was like, oh my God, is it fun in there? Should I stay? And I mean, I think because we were really good friends, I think she was just sort of like, no, because I don't remember having fun.
Well, you would be right. You had an entry fee of $5 if you got there from 9 to 10. And after that, $8. And it closed at 2 a.m. And here's some quotes from the people who really dug it.
Great.
Jennifer Cox, 17, said she felt nervous at adult clubs. You have to show a fake ID. Here, there's no pressure at the door and no older men trying to pick you up.
Fair enough.
She also doesn't like drugs. Dancing makes me high, she said by someone who's never been high. Others expressed similar feelings. Quote, the majority of my friends are into drinking and drugs, said Raina 14 years old. I try to get
Wait,
them.
You're saying I would be at a party with a 14-year-old?
Yes.
No.
Well,
Obviously,
this is why it was a bad vibe.
home.
It was a bad vibe because there were children there. She says, I try to get them to do the right thing. Again, bad vibe. We don't want to hang out with Raina. I try to get them to do the right thing. But if they don't, it's not my problem. If they're real friends, they respect your feelings. How did this go about them to you so quickly, Raina? We don't like drugs, said Jeremy Rosenblatt, 16. We like to meet girls. That's the point. Adults who try to enter the Saint are politely discouraged at the door, and this is my absolute favorite part of the entire piece. If they insist, they're allowed in. But that doesn't mean they fit in.
So you could still have the dirty old men in there?
Yes, if they asked a second time, they're like, okay, I guess because you're a grown-up, you can go in. Last Thursday, when a group of over 30s entered, they were approached by Mike Scheinman, 15. Hey, he said politely, like, don't you feel weird? The happy young crowd danced on. This, said Nanvia Nguyen, 16, is like the teeny bop hangout.
Teeny bop?
Yes. So that's why you didn't have a good time.
Awkward for these kids.
Yes, well,
who were cornered by whoever wrote that article too.
But they sound enthusiastic.
Gave their real names.
I know.
Forever.
And there are photos of them in here. Yes. So Monday was not a good day for Raina.
Children, if anyone is listening, if an interviewer ever asks you questions, do not give your full name. Absolutely call your parents first.
Yeah. Have nothing. Reporters are not your friends.
You're going to look like an idiot. And we're going to be naming your name in 20 years.
But yeah, these were the kids who, you know what? They found a place.
I'm happy
good for them. Good for them.
Aren't you glad you weren't quoted in that article?
Aren't I glad I never went to the Saint for that, for a juice cleanse? God help me. I'm going to go out tonight and hang out with the other dry kids and have a juice cleanse. Maybe my colon's going to get a scrub tonight at the Saint. Yeah, your colon's getting scrubbed at the Saint. Just another night, my friend.
Oh,
that night. Sorry.
You went on quite a little adventure there.
We're going to cut that. Sorry. But yes, it seemed to me as I was reading this. And so in summation, Senator, I'm leaning into the mic. I was thinking about the incredible journey from Olivier. He did this, but they did this even better at Regine's, a gold-plated membership card. Mm. And, they had like a speakeasy door, like, Mo sent me kind of thing. Yeah. Really the chicest of the chic too. Hi, I'm wearing my retainer. And I just wanted some juice. Because I just want to hang out with the other kids who aren't being subjected to peer pressure. That's how I see this particular evolution. It was not the only game in town. We know that. But yes, Meg, you felt uncomfortable for a reason.
You're already giggling about your tie-in.
Okay, so those poor boys were wrongly held against their will in prison for how many years? A lot. Well, you were wrongfully held against your will at that horrible dry party. Forced to drink juice.
For
Not
like
a good parallel.
5 minutes. No.
I don't know. That's all that I can come up with. All right, what do you think is a tie-in?
I'm thinking of like the lone juror.
Oh, I have a better tie-in that's much more obvious. Okay. There was a lot of crack in your story. The guy who actually did it was smoking crack, and there was a person next to him that was like, crack. And this entire party was about just say no.
Okay, sure.
There you go.
Yeah.
Drugs.
By the way, I don't know why a lot of people were recommending our podcast this weekend, but I just got a lot of texts from people going, what was the episode about this? Can you remind me? Because I was telling my friend about it. And just 3 or 4 from completely different people.
We asked people to do recommendations last week.
I don't think that's why, though. I think it was just happenstance because those people hadn't listened to the last couple episodes, believe you me. They were just like, oh, by the way, it reminded me of this other episode you did, and I was telling my brother about it. Would you remind me what that was called? Because we have a lot of
Well, then more proof that we are the sociologists that we fancy ourselves to be. Everything's connected.
And all those people didn't even know each other.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, so then what an opportune moment to say, hey, join the bandwagon. Recommend us to your friends.
Yeah.
All right.
It's trending.
We're
trendy.
We're trending.